Hello, dear subscribers. It's been more than 3 months since I've been confined to YouTube jail, and I hope this message reaches you because it's of great importance. So, we have this accidental discovery, and this article has appeared recently at the end of May. In 1928, scientist Alexander Fleming returned to his laboratory after a 2-week holiday. A petri dish of bacteria accidentally left on the lab bench somehow became cross-contaminated with Penicillium notatum mold. Fleming noticed the mold inhibited the growth of the bacteria. This accidental discovery marked the dawn of the antibiotic era and a turning point in medical and perhaps human history. Recently, another accidental discovery has scientists wondering whether we have turned another corner in history. And as you're going to see, it's an even greater turn that we've taken in history. The story begins with Kevin McKernan, a scientist with 25 years experience in the that word field and a leading expert in sequencing methods for those letters, which we shall also be referring to as the Book of Life and those letters. He has worked on the Human That Word project and more recently in medicinal that word involving those letters sequencing. In the process of trying to sort out a sequencing problem, McKernan used anonymously sent that word and those words, those numbers, that word, and that word to act as those letters' controls. Somebody sent me these thinking this is the perfect control. It should be pure. So if you get this to work, you'll sort out your those letters sequencing problems. McKernan explains in a recent interview. They were right about that. It did sort out our problems, but what we discovered in the process is that they weren't pure, those letters. They actually had a lot of those letters in the background. McKernan was shocked. It's not what we were looking for. I had this hunch that the new modified those that word they have in those letters may have a higher error rate and therefore hang on, let me check whether I have got the correct page so I get them in sequence. Yes, it's the right one. And therefore, I'll enlarge that for you. We would see more mistakes in those letters. So I knew we would have to sequence like a million-fold deep over and over again to find these mistakes. When we did that, those letters popped up and I thought, oh, that's a bigger problem. We have to focus on that. I kind of went into panic mode, realizing that I didn't budget any time to look into this and the word has to know about it. Okay? The word has to know about this. Because I think this is the most important discovery to date concerning the Book of Life. Let's pause here and look at what we're told about that word and those letters injections. We're assured the injections are safe. Meanwhile, adverse event reporting systems around the world record previously unseen rates of adverse events and injuries. The injections are effective. We would ask, effective for what? Not stopping transmission. Certainly not. We're not sure about preventing serious illness either, evidenced by recent data. and the New South Wales health reports that show a disproportionate number of hospital and ICU admissions amongst that word. The injection materials stay at the injection site. Recently released documents obtained under Freedom of Information Act show the lipid that word become widely distributed, notably to the liver, spleen, adrenal glands, ovaries, testes, and may I add, the bone marrow. The injections won't change your book of life. Let's look at that last one a little bit closer. The Australian TGA states you can find reputable information about that word and that word on their It Is True section of the website. It is worth a look. In answer to the question, can that word and that word alter my book of life? The TGA is clear. No, that word and that word do not alter your book of life. They explain. Those letters and that word use a synthetic that word code called those letters to give our cells instructions about how to make that word unique, that word protein. When our body has made the protein encoded by those letters and that word, it then recognizes that word protein as being foreign and launches an immune response against it. Those letters from that word does not change or interact with our book of life in any way. Well, that's okay then, right? Possible routes for those letters to convert your book of life, including a process known as reverse transcription, were discounted until the publication of an annoying little paper in 2022 by Alden et al. An in vitro study, which means in a petri dish outside of the human body, involving human liver cells, which showed that word and those letters were expressed into the book of life within 6 hours. That's all it takes. 6 hours after being injected. Let's make our way to the next page. So, at the time, this was assumed due to reverse transcription of those letters. However, in light of McKernan's discovery, there is a whole new possibility to consider. What if that word already contained those letters? Then arguments about whether those letters could reverse transcribe into your book of life become irrelevant. Let's return to McKernan and take a closer look at what he found. In addition to the expected those letters, he also found those letters fragments, other pieces of those letters, and two forms of those letters, linearized and circular. The significance of the circular or plasmid those letters is important. The plasmid those letters is the complete recipe used to program bacterial cells to mass produce those letters. Those letters should not be there. So these, you see, the bacterial plasmid has been used for this purpose. Further investigation by McKernan showed the plasmid those letters contained in that word were indeed viable and capable of transformation in bacterial cells. So not only has this been done in vitro, but now it has been done in other living organisms in bacterial cells. So that word and that word, vials of bivalent that word that McKernan tested, were contaminated with those letters encoding that word gene and potentially capable of inserting into the that word of an organism. The question is, those letters have the potential to become part of the genome of a human organism, and if so, what might be the consequences? This would have required looking at genotoxicity, something Australia's TGA says that word injections were not tested for and the TGA did not ask for. In case you are wondering, there are strict guidelines about those letters contamination levels in those letters products. The European Medicines Agency and FDA stated limits of 330 nanograms of those letters per milligram of those letters. In Australia, the TGA says it should be no more than 10 nanograms per dose. It's unclear how these limits were decided. Personally, we'd be hoping for zero of those letters in those letters injections, and no, I will not call it our. It's not mine. I don't want to have anything to do with it. This means those letters should not be more than 0.033% of the total nucleic acids in the dose, but McKernan's analysis demonstrated those letters contamination of up to 35% in the bivalent injection samples. This is up to 1,000 times higher than deemed to be acceptable by the regulating authorities. I don't think this is by accident. I think the so-called contamination is intentional. You may recall the Asilomar conference in 1975, where they, and you know who they are, they met, where they decided that they would change the entire genome of all plants and animals on Earth. And at the time, I was naive. I thought by plants and animals they meant plants and four-legged animals, but I underestimated them. They included humans as well in that change. You may want to look it up. Silomar Conference, ASILOMAR, 1975. You can look it up, you'll find it. So we were saying there was up to 1,000 times higher than deemed to be acceptable by the regulating authorities. Yet this went through. Next, McKernan analyzed the monovalent earlier injections. That word, monovalent injections, were also found to be contaminated with those letters, though not as much. The levels of those letters in that word, monovalent injections, were 18 to 70 times higher than the EMA limit. So, what happens now? These results are in the process of being further verified by the scientific community. In the Essence of Speed, McKernan published his findings and methods publicly on Substack and online. So you may find him there, okay? He explains the publication system. During that word is politicized, so that's probably not going to get the word out very quickly. I had to do my best to document this all and make the data public. If McKernan's findings are verified, the implications are serious, very serious. Widespread those letters contamination would bring into question the quality of the entire dose letters injection manufacturing process, safety systems, and regulatory oversight. In addition, Those letters might not be the only contaminant. This contamination begs a question. What does Australia's Office of that Word Technology Regulator know about the safety of those letters injections? And what discussions have occurred between the TGA and the OGTR regarding the safety of these injections? Because they aren't that thing that begins with a V, he rightly calls them injections. Some of these questions are being asked and will hopefully get answers soon, we hope, and other questions that weighs heavily, very heavily, may I add. What does this accidental discovery mean for those who've had those letter injections in terms of their health, their offspring, and future of the human genome? Scientists, and a question that weighs even more heavily. If the human, that word, has been changed, then is that person eligible for salvation? And to my mind, the, this this verse comes to mind in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. And he caused it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And now, with the CBDCs and the digital ID coming up, we understand how all these processes are connected. Verse 17, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Then we are reminded of the consequences of those who have had such a change done to their book of life, where it is written in Revelation chapter 14, verse 9, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, and remember, only the King James Version says that the mark is in the forehead and in the hand. The other versions have purposely changed that word in to on. That is how evil and how subtle the devil is with his deception. Verse 10, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And verse 11, and the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. And for those who keep on insisting that the mark is not anywhere, it's not in the right shoulder or in the forehead, I refer them to an article. I'm not sure whether I had done a video about this, but if I haven't, I will certainly do it. About airport machinery scanning people for Lucifer ASE that lights up in the forehead and at the injection site. And if you do your research, right hand can be used interchangeably with right arm. All right? So, right hand and right arm are used interchangeably. They can mean the same thing. And if you recall, in Daniel, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 9, that arms will stand on their part, it says. They will queue up, they will line up to take that abomination that we read of in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16, the abomination that caused desolation. And finally, verse 12, this is for those of us who have been patient and have not taken the abomination. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So, back to our article. So, those are the implications. This question weighs heavily that the book of life has been irreversibly and eternally changed. And this is the abomination of desolation that we read in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. Scientists and genomics experts are shocked by the discovery, understandably so. McKernan, too. I didn't expect to find that word's entire blueprint for how they manufacture this thing sitting in the file. Neither did we. So I urge you to share this video, share it as soon as possible before it may be taken down. If possible, save it to a hard drive, and please subscribe to this channel because this channel is heavily shadow banned. God bless you all, and I remind you that whosoever calleth upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Romans 10:13.